So David, let's go a little bit back in time here. I want to kind of focus on the early days. Did you get to know any of your grandparents when they were living?
My grandfather passed away before I was born, but my grandmother, I knew my grandmother as about a 7-year-old,
Yourself?
and I have very little memory of my grandmother, and none of my grandfather.
Okay. Were they living on a farm, your grandfather and your grandmother?
Yeah, this is the farm, the home farm where we are. We are now on Daisy Road.
Did they or somebody give the farm a name?
Yeah, it's been named Mapledale Farm is the name.
What's the middle word?
Mapledale
Dell.
Farm.
Any significance to that?
Well, at that time, the meadow was full of maples, but they have been taken out now. There aren't many maples in the farm, but we have 2 breeds of cattle, and the Ayrshires are registered just with the Mapledale prefix, but the Holsteins, evidently somebody else had the Mapledale farm, and our Holsteins have to be, when we register a Holstein, has to be labeled with Maryland Mapledale Farm.
So Granddad, Grandma bought this farm?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And let's give them first names.
Belden, I'm the third, and that was Belden David Patrick, the original.
And Grandma?
Was Olivia.
Okay. And you called her?
Granny.
Good for her.
Now, there is a little interesting story.
Please.
The family owned the farm right at the corner of Daisy Road in Lisbon, that the farm the Lambert Sissel owns now. And my wife said to Lambert one time about Patrick's owning that farm, and he said, no, the Patricks never owned that farm. But Mark Martin, a friend of mine, did the study and found that the Patricks did own it. And the reason why they left the Lisbon farm to where we are now was because there was no water on it. And in those early days, water was important for a farm, and that's why we moved from Lisbon. The family moved from Lisbon to Daisy Road but now we have to fence that creek to keep the cows out of it.
So it's interesting, at that time when you realized that situation with water, was the second farm running with electricity?
No, I remember when electricity was put in our house.
What was that like?
Well, I was probably, that was probably this is probably 43 or 4 before we had electricity, because I remember carrying the lantern around and holding the lantern for my father, and he asked me, can you see what I'm doing? And I said, yes. He said, well, I guess I ought to be able to see too then.
So let's fill ourselves in then. We know who your grandparents are, your dad and mom's first names.
My father was Belden David Patrick Jr., and my mother was Olivia, also Olivia.
As was?
My great-grandmother was Olivia too. And we have a granddaughter that is Olivia.
That is interesting.
It's unusual for a mother-in-law have the same first name as her daughter-in-law.
Exactly. It's quite a coincidence. So let's talk about anything else you remember. They had a farm, you were out, they had a farm, didn't have water on it, went to the next farm over to use, because it had water.
Because it has a cat, it runs into the cattail where the golf course is.
What is that little piece of water called?
Cattail River.
Okay.
How did you transport the water?
No, we gave up the Lisbon farm and moved to Daisy because of the water. But you mean, how did we transfer the water then?
Well, you got the water out of the Cattail Creek.
Yeah.
By what method? Did you have electricity to pump it?
No, the cows went to the meadow and drank out of the river.
So the purpose of the Cattail Creek was to water the animals.
Yeah, yeah.
And you didn't use.
We had a hand dug well that we used for the house, but it wasn't enough water to supply all the cows with water.
What kind of pump was that?
The pump, I mean, this doesn't register, but it was a hand pump that you were up and down with the lever, right? Cast iron, yes, yeah.
Close to the house, this pump was, or did you have
It was close,
transportation
just
system to get it to the house?
There was a road that separated the house and the well. The well was right there by the house.
So how was how in this hole in the ground? How did that water get to the house?
We had to carry it with buckets up to the house, and
Every day?
yeah,
No,
yeah.
Was there in the house some storage container for the water? Or
Not any large
so
containers.
it was a daily process of refilling water in the house.
Yes,
water in the
it
house.
was a daily process. Yes.
Who was involved in that bucket brigade?
Well, I didn't do much of that because that's when I was small. We did dig a well when I was probably 13 or 14, and then we started pumping to the cows in the barn and into the house too. But we put electricity in, and then it wasn't long before we put the pump in to run water to the house and barn.
So, I forgot to ask you, when you were little, and of course, throughout your life, did you have siblings?
Yes,
What?
I had twin sisters that were 4 years younger than I am, and I had a sister that was 5 years older than I am and still with us, and I have a brother that was 7 years younger than he passed away about three years ago.
So, two brothers, no.
No, one brother and three sisters.
There's two brothers, meaning two males.
Yeah, and
three girls.
three, yeah.
Three ladies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, there's mom, there's dad, there's the five of you, and some of you experienced the transition to electricity?
Yeah, I did, and I don't guess Jimmy, probably my brother that was 7 years younger, he was probably too young to realize that we were going into electricity.
So at night, how'd you keep warm?
We had a coal stove, yeah. And
Just one?
no, we had a wood stove in the kitchen and a coal stove in the living room.
Heat just rise for the...
Yeah, we had a hole in could go upstairs, yes.
You remember about what the time the electricity came into the house?
Cigar Brown, did you ever hear of him?
Sure.
Cigar Brown did it.
His old blue van.
Yeah, and it was probably, I think I said before, and I want to get my date straight, it was probably when I was 12 or 13, so that would have been in 43 or 44 that we put electricity in.
You know, Cigar Brown used to test the circuits. When you turn them on, he'd stick his finger in it. That's how he knew it was live.
Is that right? I don't remember. You're kidding. I don't remember him that way. But
All right, so
I remember the name, yes, Cigar Brown.
So then there were lanterns, there were the stoves, and were you allowed to use the lantern yourself?
We had lanterns outside, but we had more lamps in the house. The kerosene lamp is what when I was little.
Were you allowed to use that?
Were we allowed to use it?
Were you allowed to use it when you were little? Do you pick it up, move it around?
I don't remember us little ones carrying it around. I don't remember. The parents always took care of that.
Did you have a bathroom, or did you have a lantern to go to an outhouse or something?
We didn't get our bathroom till the early 50s, 51.
So from 43 on, how did you get to the bathroom?
Well, I don't remember taking the lamp, but I remember where it was. Yeah, in the backyard. Yeah,
And was it a one-holder or two-holder?
one. Yeah. Well, sometimes us guys would go right behind the house. We didn't. Yeah. We make sure that the coast was clear.
And they were, of course, downwind, of course. Okay, so on the next subject.
Yeah, let's get off of that one.
Yeah. But thank you. So, you're, there's a farm scene going on at this time when you're 10, 11, 12 years old around you, and perhaps even you're assisting with that. Can you describe what that scene was like when you were 10, 11, 12 years old?
Well, I think one thing that I remember, and we always had dinner in the evening before we milked. We had about 18 or 20 cows that we were milking by hand, and I either had to help milk or dry dishes. So I learned how to help milk rather than dry dishes. I always remember that story.
Good choice.
Right. But
So-
then after I milked my cows, sometime I would, because this was after supper, I'd lay we had stanchion barns where the cows were in stanchions tied up. And if a cow was laying down, I can remember laying down beside the cow going to sleep until my father was finished with all the work in the barn, the heavier work.
How in your time did you make the distinction between supper and dinner?
Well, I guess we always called it supper then. I think now is more appropriate to call it dinner, right? Yeah, that's what.
Then there's a new word
Eat-
called lunch.
Oh yes, well that's the middle of the day though, right? Yeah, that's. Yeah.
Yeah, but in my time it was dinner and supper.
Even in the middle of the day,
Yeah, we had our biggest meal at noontime.
is that
You
right?
still had a lot of work to do. Supper was kind of what was left over from dinner time.
Well, we generally didn't. But right now I either try to eat a good breakfast and a good lunch, and then I'm light on supper or dinner. There are times when I'll just eat a yogurt, and because my cardiologist told me to stay away from the donuts and the ice cream and not to gain too much weight. So that's why I do. I love yogurt. Chobani Greek yogurt. That's.
We've got to get a commercial sponsorship now.
So and that's my favorite yogurt, and we do. I eat a lot of yogurt.
So here's the farm operation. We know that you get to go out there and take a nap when your dad's still milking. What are the other siblings doing roughly that you can remember at that time period in your life?
Well, my oldest sister did the dishes, washed the dishes, my brother he got into it at an early age too, helping on the farm because we had calves to feed. You know, it was not only the milking, and you had barns to clean, and I mean we had Jimmy would do the light work, but you know I can't remember the twins. You know how them getting involved in they were in 4-H club, and both of them were hired. My twin sisters were hired county farm queens, and then we have 3 daughters, and
So let's just concentrate on what farm life was still like when you were that little kid. Your dad.
we had horses. We farmed with horses. We didn't get a tractor till probably in 45, 46, and we had a good neighbor that we worked together with, and they bought a tractor before we did, and then after I graduated, and their son was about my age, but he was 2 years behind me in school. I did their plowing with their tractor, and then came over and did our plowing. Our first tractor was a W.C. Alisheimer that we bought from Roby Mollings at Daisy.
All right, so let me go back before we get to the tractor, because you said we had horses.
Yes. Yeah, I worked horses. Yeah, we had a one moldboard riding plow that I can remember on Saturday working, plowing, because our mail carrier his daughter was my girlfriend, and she said, my father called you Little Belden when you were out there plowing with that plow. So, but then I harried with horses, 3-horse team, and we had a horse that was the third horse on the outside that was always hanging back, but his tongue would hang out. So one time I got a little provoked with him because he's hanging back, and I pulled his tongue, and my father saw me do it. He wasn't very happy with me because I pulled his tongue. But I cultivated with horses. See, who was just yesterday I was talking, can't remember who it was, we were talking about farming in those early days. Oh, I know, our veterinarian. He said he asked me if I'd ever planted corn, and I said, yes. I started out with a planter with horses, planting corn. And then he said he was planting it with a 2-row, he was cultivating with a 2-row cultivator, and he got mixed up and got in the wrong rows, and he was tearing corn out because he had the wrong 2. But I said, well, I never had that problem, but I can remember cultivating corn with the handles we had, and you could move those handles back and forth and move it into the corn, closer to the corn. And then I also told him I can remember getting sleepy and pulled up beside the woods when we were plowing with the tractor and taking a nap up beside the woods when I was supposed to be plowing corn.
Yeah.
That was with the tractor.
How about the horses and any kind of hay equipment?
We had a rake that you hit a lever, it would go along and pull the hay up. It was like that. Well, I know you can't see this, but or hear this, but and then when we got to where it was full, we'd hit a lever, and we would raise up and drop the hay there. So we had to, with a fork, we would bring the wagon and horses out in the field, and with the forks we'd load hay on the wagon, and then take it in the barn. And we had a hay fork in the barn, in the top of the barn, that came down, and you stuck it in the hay and pulled the lever out to give it some width. And then you had a horse out. We called him Old Patsy, that was his name. And we'd take him out so far, and then you could hit a lever and drop that hay in the hay mow. And then you had people in the hay mow that were distributing it around the hay in the hay mow. I guess that was the main way we handled hay in the early days. And then we had a neighbor moved in above us from Montgomery County. I don't know if you ever heard of any of the Olin family in Montgomery County. This was Carl Olin, moved just above our farm, and he had a hay loader, and we kind of worked together. And then they'd hook the hay loader behind his truck, and then two of us would get on the truck and spread the hay around. And
how did you make the rows? Was that still the dump rake, or did you have a side delivery rake?
we had a side delivery rake when we went to the hay loader. Yeah, we had to. We didn't have to throw it on in a wagon out in the field. It picked it right up and put it right up to us. And I remember being a little smart one time, and Mr. Olin was driving the truck, and my father and I were in the back loading it, and had to stop because we weren't getting it spread out quick enough. And And Mr. Olin said to me, David, you got to work a little faster. And I'm not proud of what I said to him. I said, well, if I'm not doing fast enough, you get up here and do it. And my father wasn't very happy with me with that comment. So my good neighbor, because he was a good neighbor. Yeah.
So, David, you had to learn a lot to do all these chores, it sounds like. And
Yeah.
who did you wind up learning a lot of these chores from?
My father was the main person. Yeah, and as I said, we had neighbors that we were close with, that we worked together with. I don't know whether you ever remember any of the Slagle family. Well, Charles Slagle was a neighbor. The Vernon Bandel, you remember Vernon Bandel? Donnie Bandel and Alan Bandel's dad.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, see,
Went to school with both of them.
yeah, well, Alan and Donnie's mother was a Slagle, was Mr. Slagle, Charles Slagle's sister. And they were good neighbors that we worked together with.
Did you say you were running a 3-horse team?
Yeah, that was for herring.
How old were you?
I wasn't very old. I probably was only 12, 13.
How did you manage that?
I did it.
Put the reins in your hand and steer them away.
Yeah, and I walked. You were walking. You didn't ride anything when you were herring. Now, as I did say, there was a riding. We had a single moldboard riding plow, but we also had the single moldboard plow you walk behind. But that was a little bit too much for me, because it was.
Well, what do you? I mean, how do you communicate with 3 gigantic horses that are in front of you, and you're just holding onto these 2?
Well, they were horses that were tame, and they weren't any problems. And we used to, in the wintertime, we used to ride them. But they wouldn't let us ride in the summertime because they were working. But they were quiet horses. You could do anything with them. Never kicked or never. They were just quiet.
Did you learn to control the horses before you became a horseback rider, or did you? How did that relationship happen?
Well, I guess I can remember working the horses before I remember. Neighbors had horses too, and we'd get together in the winter and ride horses. But I can remember being old enough to handle a horse, because that was a little different. When you're riding a horse, it's a little different than working a horse, because working the horses, they're generally slow and methodical and don't give you any. It was not a problem.
But did it require special training? I mean, because you're asking these 3 horses to think together, to respond together, to move together.
Well, the way they were hooked together. They had a bar that goes in front.
Triple tree.
Yeah, and they all stayed together except this one horse I said hung back a little bit. The third one that was all the way on the end. I remember the horses' names. It was Patsy and Beauty and Bob. And the Bob was almost looked like a racehorse. He wasn't a real heavy draft horse type, and that's the one I used to like to ride.
Did the reins go to the central horse or to all 3 of them?
It went to the two main horses that you were walking out on the left side of the hare, and the other horse was hooked to them, and the reins didn't go to the third horse.
Did you care for the horses as well, or did your dad do that?
Yeah, we used to, because we were at that time we we fed ears of corn. The horses would eat the ear, and they would take it off the cob, and we gave them hay. That was their diet: hay and ear corn. It's amazing how they could shred that grain off of those cobs.
With their lips.
Pardon?
With their lips.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where did they live during the growing season, and where did they live in the winter?
Pardon?
Where did they live during the growing season when you weren't using them as
We had barn with. We had three individual stalls, and then we had a box stall that the horses were in. And the barn, our bank barn, had 18 stanchions in it where we had the milk cows, and we also had 3 box stalls in our bank barn at that time.
the winter time? They would just be, you would just, how did they perform for any service during the winter, or did they just wound up hanging out?
Well, we were. I can remember we were in the early days. We were shipping milk in cans, and we had a horse. We had a drag that we would hook the horse to the drag and take the milk cans out to the end of the road, and then the milk truck would come and pick them up. So we used a horse in the wintertime for that. And then when we could haul manure then in the wintertime, and we used the horses to haul the manure in the wintertime, but we can't haul manure now in the wintertime.
So, was there at any point in time where the milk was being picked up by other horse-drawn vehicles, if you remember?
Well, there was a milk truck that picked up our canned milk.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't remember, I'm sure your granddad had the milk being picked up by a horse-drawn vehicle versus a moving
Well,
truck.
I think they used to take, in the early days, I don't remember that, but I heard them talking, where they take the milk cans to Woodbine, and they'd put the milk cans on a train, and the train would take it to Baltimore in the city. So that was.
Who was doing that in your family?
That would be my father.
Okay, don't fiddle with that microphone because you're making sounds when you do that. Thank you.
Okay.
It's all right. So, I'm going to see if we can't think about more things between your father and his father. Do you have any experiences, like for instance, did you hear of any injuries during that time?
No, you can hear about how farm accidents, but I don't remember of any farm accidents that we had.
Okay.
Whether I'm 85 years shown or not, but I can't think of any.
So let me get some placement here now. We didn't get, I don't think I got the acreage of the farm.
Our home farm is only 93 acres.
But when you first got there and the Curtis Creek was running, or whatever that was called.
Cattail.
Cattail Creek was running.
It was
the same size?
Yeah, 93 acres, yeah.
So 93 acres was sustaining at that time 18 cattle?
Yeah, but we rented. There were farms around that in those days where the next generation didn't want to farm. We rented the farm, the Prairie Farm, and then there was also a farmer across the road, the Smith Farm. We rented other ground, as we do now. We
What did the ground do then? What did you rent it for? To produce what?
corn, hay. At that time, we didn't. We grow a lot of soybeans now for grain and to sell, but at that time we didn't have any soybean. It was mainly corn, grain, and wheat. We had
For the animals.
Yeah, and for the straw for bedding, the wheat and barley.
Primarily, it was to care for the animals.
Yes.
Used to care for the animals.
Yeah.
You weren't getting it out to the other farmers
No.
or public.
No, we didn't sell hay or grain like we do now.
Did your father stay with farming for his whole life?
Till he passed away, yes.
When did he pass away?
When he was 73, and the day that he raked hay, the day that he had his heart attack, because I was breeding cows then, and we were having our local dinner at our Lisbon church, and he was heading for that for the dinner at our meeting for the AI meeting, and he had a heart attack on going to that.
By
And
himself? He was by himself?
no, my stepmother. My mother was killed in an automobile accident when she was only 59, and they
Your dad was driving with his
stepmother.
second wife or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
And then he was taken to Baltimore County Hospital, and he passed away Friday night.
did he ever talk? So he had no warning, is what you're saying.
No, he
Nobody in the
no.
family knew.
Yeah, you know, I probably have the same condition that he had, but you know, with today's doctors and technology, and that's what prolonged my life. I took care of medication, and so he had no. You know, I'm on medication now, but he didn't have that. He had no warning.
Yeah, it had to be a shock for everybody then.
You know, reference going back to the wheat, did you have thrashing locally or on your farm?
Yeah, Melvin Wessel. Do you ever know Melvin Wessel?
I know some Wessels.
Melvin moved from Fulton area up to Lisbon, and he had the farm that Lambert owns now. That's where Melvin moved to, and he had a thrash machine. But then there also in Long Corner a fellow by the name of Ellie Mullings. He had a thrash machine, and even Roland Mullings at one time, Gene Mullings' dad, he had a thrash machine. So there were plenty of thrash machines then. But then I used to like to help when they were thrashing, because we always had that big dinner that in the middle of every farm had a big dinner, and they really, and it was a dirty job though, thrashing with the thrash machine. I even worked at times, in younger days, out in the hay rack. I mean, when they used to have the straw stacks out in the barnyard, I even worked out in that, helped with that at times.
Yeah, in this area, Ed Frank's dad did our thrashing,
Is that right?
and then there was a Bill Stern further down Howard,
Mhm.
Frederick Road.
Yeah, I knew
Was also-
I knew Stern. Yeah,
Was also a thrasher man.
yeah. So there were plenty of thrash machines around.
David, when you say you worked on it, I know it's a team kind of operation, right? Did you wind up switching positions in the team, or did you constantly do one particular chore?
You mean in the hay, the straw stack is what?
Whatever part you were doing.
Yeah, you had a fork and you were moving because they blew the straw out there in one place, and well, they could move it around, move the blower around, but you had to level it out and kind of, you were stomping it some to make it, try to make it a little more solid.
You didn't make bales?
Later on we did, but this is the early days when we had the haystacks out in the barnyard.
So I don't know if we're still talking about thrashing, but when you moved it around and you made the straw, what'd you do? I mean, it's going to rain sooner or later.
Well, it was rounded out, and it's amazing how much good straw was in there. It was, you know, the cows. We turned the cows out in the barnyard, and it was bedding for the cows out there to lay around the straw stack. But then we did later on. We went away from the straw stacks and baled. They had a baler that was hooked right there with the thrash machine, and baled it as it was thrown in to take the grain out of it.
Thrashing, sort of, that's the end of the season kind of, isn't it?
Well, it probably was the last of July.
So not really all the way up to
No,
October.
because I can remember one year we had a lot of rain, and the wheat was still out there in the shocks, and we had so much rain that some of it even sprouted in the shocks, and that was when Howard County Fair was at Laurel Raceway, and it rained. That was a rainy time for Howard County Fair at Laurel Raceway, and our wheat was sprouting in the shocks because it was such a wet summer.
What do you do?
We went ahead and thrashed it, but it wasn't grain that you could sell. You use it yourself.
Well, speaking of selling, did you take grain to the mill in Ellicott City?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What was it called then, that mill? It's called Donut in my time.
Donut Corporation. Yeah. But we didn't have that much ground that we didn't have a lot to sell. We do now, but we don't. We didn't then.
So I'm kind of interested in this. Usually we've learned that the grandfathers are somewhat resistant to the son realizing that electricity could be valuable on the farm. Do you have any experiences or heard any stories between your dad and his dad, or about this kind of decision, or was there some resistance? You see what
I have never heard of any resistance. Our family, we weren't very wealthy. It was more of when we could afford, because we didn't get our TV. We didn't get a TV very early. And when you don't put a bathroom in till maybe the early 50s, or that it was an economic thing that we had. I mean, our family has never had a lot of money to do, except we've been blessed now. I'm jumping the subject, but we were able to buy 2 farms because if it hadn't been for the preservation program in the county, Roland Zepp, you ever hear of Roland Zepp, Wilbur Zepp? Roland Zepp, we bought 20 years ago, we bought the Zepp farm. Roland had passed away and we rented it from Ms. Zepp. And I said to her one time, if you ever consider selling it, I'd like to talk to you. And she did, said it was too much for her to try to keep the grass mowed. She would, and if it hadn't been for the preservation program, we could not have afforded to buy $1 million farm. And the county had the 30-year program, and that's how she wanted her estate to be paid over a 30-year period. And 20 years ago, the county was paying you 7.5% for the money you still had in the program, and she was charging us 6.5% for the money that we still owed her. And then we were able to buy another farm about 5 years ago because it was in the program.
How much was the 20-year-ago farm? How much acres was that?
It's 147 acres. It was assessed at $1.6 million.
And then the 5 years ago farm, how big is that?
Well, that was already in the program when we bought it. So we, because it was in the program and couldn't be developed, we were able to buy it because the price wasn't as high. It wasn't astronomical. But I have a son that.
How large was it though?
400 acres. But we only bought 250 of it, and the Stabler family in Montgomery County bought the other 150 acres, but they rent it to us. We still farm it.
Okay, well, not counting that, let's figure out how much acres you now have.
Well, because people keep asking me how many acres how many do we own? Okay, I didn't count so you're 93, 150, and 250. How's your math?
Write that down.
Heading up on 400 and 500, yeah.
But we farm, I just counted up.
93, 150, and 250?
Yeah. But
that's what you own, not
counting
how much you lease.
But we lease, altogether counting is 1,300 acres that we farm.
Today.
We farm today, and that's counting at what we own and what we rent.
Right.
Yeah.
About 500.
Close to 5?
Yeah.
So, but all that happened in the last 20 years?
Yeah,
So-
20 years ago is when we bought the first farm.
Okay. And we're gonna come back to that, because I'm interested in that lifestyle. So here you are a kid, we're gonna go back to that, a kid, you can be preteen or teenagers. Your brothers and your sisters and you are all, I think, are you going to school?
Yeah, my oldest sister, she went to Towson.
Not college, let's just talk about elementary.
Oh, okay. Well, we all went to Lisbon High School.
Elementary?
Yeah, Lisbon. See, Dot graduated from Lisbon all the way through elementary and high school. 7 and 4 is what that she went. I went 7 and 4. See, my twin sisters, I'm not sure. See, that's about in 1950 is when it started. 12 years in 50. See, if I graduated in 47, they went 12 years because I graduated in 47,
Okay.
and they graduated in 51. So and then Jimmy, he went 12 years.
You know, there were years when Lisbon was 1 through 11.
Pardon?
It went from 1st grade to 11th grade.
Yeah.
There were
See,
years.
that's what I did, and that's what my sister did too, oldest sister.
So your typical day while you were either at the top of your grade school or the early years of high school, describe to me your typical day during the week. You got up and you did what?
I got up and helped with the barn work, milking. The bus that I rode to Lisbon School went in Daisy Road. When it went in Daisy Road, that's when I went to the house to eat breakfast and get ready. But they always laughed at me because I always had to run out to catch a bus because the bus had to wait for me. I was always late. We weren't but 2 or 3 miles from Lisbon.
Do you remember how long your driveway was?
At that time,
You had to run out.
huh?
You had to run all the way.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, it's probably from here to the road was probably the length of our driveway.
So here you are, you got to school. This is the same typical day during the week. What went on after that?
Well, then when we got after school, when we got out of school, we went home and helped with the work in the evenings. In elementary, I did do homework, but then when it came to high school, I don't believe I ever hardly did any homework. I don't know how I got through school, but maybe because I was president of our class all 4 years, so maybe that helped me through.
A political advantage? Is that what you're describing,
No,
David?
Yeah.
So here comes, at that same area at the time and the same age, here comes Sunday. What was a Sunday like for you?
Well, we had all our work to do, and our family is a church-going family. We went to Lisbon Methodist Church every Sunday. I mean, I'm sure there are times when something could have happened that we didn't, but my family tried to go every Sunday, and I don't mean to be saying this to be bragging. In fact, when I was in FFA, they had a public speaking contest, and it's hard to believe that my topic at that time in 47 was the possibility of impregnating dairy cattle and other livestock artificially. That was my topic. And I won the state contest and had to go to Springfield, Massachusetts for the regional contest. And when I got up and started giving my spiel about impregnating dairy cows, 3 ladies got up and walked out because I assumed that's why they were sitting there all the other time. And I assumed that's because they didn't like that. And I think of now what we have on TV. So
different time, huh?
And and also this is I guess was an important part of my life. I also did a lot of church messages. In fact, Josh Warfield, you ever remember Josh Warfield? He was related to cousin of Edwin Warfield. He was there. Hired Nicodemus. Hired Nicodemus inherited the farm. Miss Mary Warfield offered to send me to college and seminar if I would go to be a minister. But I felt my father in 41 bought me 2 registered Ayrshire heifers that he couldn't really afford to buy, and I just felt Patrick's are emotional, and I felt an obligation to him to stay there on the farm because I felt if there's plenty of work to be done in the church besides being the minister. And that's what I've tried to do all my life.
May I ask, what cows were you mostly partial to?
Well, Buddy Myers, Warren G. Myers, you remember him?
Yeah.
County agent? Yeah. He was an Ayrshire enthusiast. Almost everybody in Howard County, the Hills, Howard Clark, even the Yeagers with their Holsteins had Ayrshires then. And Gavers and Herbert Streaker. Buddy Myers had everybody in Howard County with Ayrshires. And that's what my 2 heifers were from Wilbur F. Barkdale was the name of the owner of the Forest View Farm. That's where I got those 2 Ayrshire heifers through Mr. Myers' working with Mr. Myers. And then I don't remember what my father paid for them, but I know registered animals are more costly than your grade heifers. So
I understand that most of the creameries that make ice cream prefer the Ayrshires and Guernseys to Holsteins.
Yeah, but higher fat and protein, yes. Yeah.
So you were raising 2 of them. At what age did you start doing this?
When I was 11 years old, that's when I showed my first year at Maryland State Fair in 1941, and I took these 2 heifers to Maryland State Fair. And I remember we were supposed to have our animals clipped before lunch one day, and I hadn't gotten my 2 heifers clipped. And so Mr. Myers said, "Now, David, you got to trim your heifer." Buddy Hill, did you ever know Buddy?
Yes.
Buddy said, "David, I'll help you." And Buddy Hill and I clipped the heifers, and then we had lunch after we trimmed the. Yeah, we had to clip the heifers for the show, and then Buddy helped me trim those heifers. Oh yeah, you know Buddy, because Boone, he was married to Charlotte, yeah, because we used to play basketball together and stop there at the house on the way back from the basketball games. Played at Ellicott City when we played at Ellicott City.
So I'm still concentrating on those early days because there's a lot of interesting experiences there, and they're very different from today, as you well know.
Oh yeah.
So here are those 2 heifers. I'm not heifers. What do they call it? Was an A?
Ayrshire?
Asher?
That was the breed, yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were given the total care and operation of them, or were they particularly important to you?
Oh yeah, because they were the first registered animals that our farm had ever had, because we had a grade herd of cattle and different mixed breeds, and they were very special. Yes.
They lasted a while?
Yeah, they did. We had trouble getting heifer calves. We seemed like we were getting so many bulls that we had trouble keeping our numbers up, but they did. They stayed with us, I think, for 8 or 9 years before we didn't get them with calf and had to sell them.
So What do you remember about your grandfather passing?
No, my grandmother my grandfather passed away before I was born.
Okay.
It was my grandmother that
Yes, you did tell
I
me.
remember that
Do you remember what age she got up to?
she was 72 with him when she passed away,
Okay.
and
Where was, what
that
happened?
that was at the it was a natural death. Probably thought a heart attack. They didn't go. You didn't hear as much talk about then, but she was a special lady.
And your wife, her first name is Olivia, did you say?
No, my wife is Ann. Is her name?
Ann.
Yeah.
So Ann, I started to hear a little bit about Ann. Where did we find Ann, David?
Well, her sister and brother-in-law came to Lisbon and bought a little service station in Lisbon. And it was a Greyhound bus stop there then through Lisbon. And they had a little sandwich shop and ice cream. And every Sunday after church, we would go up and buy half a gallon of ice cream. And Ann came up on weekends and helped her sister and brother-in-law with the station. And she was just reminding me just the other day, the 5th of April is when we met. 60, see, we were married in 54. So I guess that was 53 that we met. That would be 62 years ago. The 5th of April is when we met. And poor girl.
Poor girl. All these years she's had to put up with you.
And I'll have to tell this on her. She,
Don't fiddle with the mic. Thank you.
I don't know why I keep grabbing that thing.
You're not used to it.
But my wife Ann's 5 years younger than I am. She still gets up in the morning at 3:30 and goes to the barn and milks. Now I did this morning, but I don't always get up at 3:30 and help milk. But I did this morning, and I'm going to brag now. To look at her, you never know that she was 80 years old. There is such a thing as bragging, isn't it? but I need to.
This is the time to brag.
She is a unusual person. That's what everybody says. And I'm Methodist and she's Catholic. She goes to her church and I go to my church. Religion has never been a problem. I respect hers and she respects mine. I told her the other day, I said, how come you never invite me to go to church with you and show people what good judgment you have? She didn't quite buy that.
So what was the farm like when you were starting to court Ann?
Yeah, well, it was, in 1950, we put a milking parlor in with 4 stalls, 4 in a row, that's what they had here. Had 4 in a row here. And that's what we put in 1950. And
how did that help?
Well, we went away from, we had horns, Ashers have horns. We had to take the horns off the cows because they were running, we had a barn were running loose and they would damage each other with horns. So we had to dehorn cattle. But it was easier as far as milking because we were milking with a line that ran the milk right in the tank then. And we didn't have to carry milk like we were before when we were milking in the staunching barn.
What else was different?
What else was different?
In comparing the two processes.
Well, we had to loosen, before when they were in the staunchings, we had to scoop the manure and and wheel it out in a wheelbarrow, and we had a little chute that we would pull the manure spreader under the chute and just dump it with the wheelbarrow in the chute. But then when we went to the milking parlor, it was loose housing. The cattle, we had a barn that underneath it was completely open, and the cattle ran. We had to bed it almost every day, but then when we cleaned it, we had a manure loader on the tractor, and we would go in with the tractor and fork the manure up and dump it in the spreader. That was different then, quite a bit different from what the
Much faster.
Yes.
Did your dad ever hire help?
Yeah, we had families across the road that were, they were great black people that lived across from us. And they're young people and even some of the old people. We always had some of those families working for us on the farm. And they were, when you hear about, well.
Did you ever have German prisoners come out that far?
Yeah, we personally didn't, but when thrashing, they would, I don't know how they worked that, because anyway, that was during the early 40s. I know there were German prisoners that worked with the thrash machines that followed, and I don't remember who was the one that worked that, but there were German prisoners that I worked with when I was going around helping with thrashing.
And that was out in
Western, yeah, it was out in our area, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were generally picked up down in St. John's Lane in Ellicott City.
I knew it was down that way.
Near southern states.
Yeah.
Freezer locker, remember?
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were times, not many years, but a couple of years, before we got freezers and electricity, we had our beef in the freezers there at the locker plant.
And that's where the prisoners were picked up when they came from Fort Meade.
Is that right? Mm-hmm.
And there were certain prisoners who preferred certain farmers, and when they all got there, when they would see, like Mr. Patrick come up with his truck, they'd all go to Mr. Patrick's truck. Or they didn't assign them. They just went.
Yeah, that seemed to work. They were good help. Yeah. I guess a family that Van Leeshot, do you ever remember any Van Leeshot? When you were talking about people, they came from Holland over here, and one went to Jim Clark, Leon Van Leeshot went to Jim Clark's, and Henry Van Leeshot went to Howard Clark's and worked for them. And then they went together on Dorsey Owen Farm. They went together farming there, because I bred cows for them down there. But then they went to New York and bought farms up in the Finger Lakes area in New York. We're getting off, I know, of your subjects, but they turned out to be great people. They were from Holland, and they were brother-in-laws. They weren't brothers, but both had the same last name, Van Leeshot. And Henry just passed away not too long ago. If he ever saw a magazine and saw our cows in a magazine, he'd always call me and tell me talk to me about cows. He must called every year.
I want to go back to Ann. We know Ann's pretty special, I can tell.
You better believe it.
So you started courting, and I think I just learned that Ann didn't have much or any experience around farming. Is that true?
No farm background at all.
So how did that evolve for you and her? Because there was a big gap between what you do every day of your life and what she was doing. Did you invite her over to the farm, or how do you think that interest started growing?
Well, she thought she was marrying a rich farmer, but she got fooled along the line. And
I'm sure your charm didn't hurt it.
and I took her back to Catonsville that night, and we dated regularly from. We met as the 5th of April, and we were married the next year, the 16th of May. We were married the next year.
No, this is the irony of it. So you said we dated regularly, but here you are working on this farm practically 7 days a week. So now it's like David's like, wait a minute, I want to be with this woman, but how do I get out of all this farm work I've got to do? How did you balance that out?
Well, that was the evening business. I mean, I can remember coming home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's almost time to go to the barn. But I mean, I don't know how Ann. Well, see, her father was German. He was a worker. He was a hard worker. Her Wurtzer was her name, and her maiden name, and her father was he was Jerry. His name was Jerry, and but he was a one that was really a good worker, and I guess my wife inherited that skill from her father, because she.
Did she have an interest in helping on your farm?
Well, I guess she did, but I kept her busy raising kids. We had.
Well, I was thinking about during the courting time, because what I'm seeing is you have a very different lifestyle. She has a very different lifestyle, but obviously you're attracted on other levels. But the point is, at some point, you have to start merging these lifestyles.
She fell right into the farm life, and not. It never was a problem with her adhering to my style of life. We were married in '54, and I started breeding cows in '55, and I went out after milking and did the AI work, and fell asleep. I remember pulling up Jim Clark's barn one night. Had a lot of people rode with me on calls in the evening, and pulled up. John Bewley was riding with me, and I said, John, I got to have 20 minutes, and I laid my head back on the seat and go to sleep for 20 minutes, and then get up and go breed cow. In fact, I'm a delegate for our milk co-op, and I was at Liverpool, New York, to a delegate session, and a lady that writes for Lancaster Farmer, it's Lancaster Magazine,
Seen it.
was at our table, and I've known the lady for years. She's a delegate for our co-op too, and they got to talking about how many years I've been breeding cows, and which is 60 years I've been doing AI work. And then when Lancaster Farmer came out with their dairy section, there was an article in the Lancaster Farmer called The Midnight Rider. And she wrote an article a 2-page article about that, me breeding cows, and how I know we're getting off the subject away from Ann, but this was very interesting to me. And then not long after that article came out, I got a call from a lady in Damascus that said she had 5 Longhorns she needed bred. And I said, well, I bred Longhorns about 30, 40 years ago, but I don't have any Longhorn semen, and I don't think Select does. She said, well, I have 5 cows, and I like to have them bred. And she said, but I have a bull. I said, well, why don't you turn the bull with them? And she says, no, I want them bred artificially. And she said, I want you to collect the bull and breed these cows. And I said, well, I did that 35, 40 years ago, but I'm 85 and I don't do that anymore. And she said, well, I'll see if I can find semen, but I'd like to have them bred at midnight. And I said, why midnight? Why do you want to? Well, aren't you the midnight rider? That was it. And you know who it was? It was my grandson's girlfriend was just jiving me. She was. I'm off the subject, I know.
No, I like that story. Let's talk about the earlier part of that then. So we have natural breeding, then we have AI breeding, and you're and Dad had some breeding going on, and David is getting curious. I'd like to hear about the earlier days when you were discovering about breeding, because obviously it led to you getting more serious about it. So tell me about how you saw that in the earlier days.
Well, I wanted to improve our herd, and with AI breeding, you can breed to the, it could be a bull in New York that I could use because he's one of the best bulls of the breed, and that's why I think that, you know, you can. I don't mean to be bragging, but we've shown our cows at Maryland State Fair, at Harrisburg, at Madison, and we've had champion cows at all those shows, and it's because of the good bulls we've used and the genetics, the good genetics that we've used. Now, you know, you can breed for, if you have a cow that needs improvement with feet and legs, well, these bull studs, they tear their bulls down and tell them, they'll tell you what bulls will improve legs, what bulls will improve udders, what will improve dairy temperament, and you can mate your cows to the bull that your animal needs the most improvement. And that's why I got into AI. And you know, it was interesting to me, or I never would have selected that topic to talk on, because that was something that I thought was something that I wanted to know more about. And
How did you find out about AI?
well, there was in New Jersey, there was a Dr. E.J. Weatherby that was doing research on, and he wrote a book on AI. And I read the book on that he wrote about, and a lot of the information I used in my talk was that I used from his book.
What age were you approximately?
That was in 47 when 46 is when I did the state contest, so I was only 16 years old at that time.
Was Dad using this method before you, or did you introduce
No, we
it to
were.
Dad?
See, this was just the beginning of it. We still had a bull and a bull almost got me, and that was one reason why I wanted to get rid of the bull.
What do you mean almost got you?
Well, the bulls will kill you. I've had friends that have been. Jimmy Whelan's wife, Ruthie, her father was killed by a bull. So that's why I wanted to get rid of the bull.
So you had a close call, David? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, we'd fed him hay, and he had horns then too, and he got his horns in the hay and threw it all underneath of him, and I went up there he was tied in a area about this wide, and I went in there to put the hay up, and then he got me. I was between the horns, but lucky somebody was there. So that was one reason why I was going to get rid of the bulls.
And so I'm going to, did Dad then, at that time period, when you were 16 and you were learning AI, did you introduce it to your farm?
No, we had John Fisher worked for. You know John Fisher? He was up on Hake's farm up in Cooksville. Well, he was the first one that bred cows here in Howard County. He worked at Maryland at the bull stud, and then he bred cows, and then Fulton Ivy bred in this area. So we jumped right into AI as soon as it became available.
Did you have somebody come out to first teach you? I mean, reading the book's one thing, but having hands-on is another. How did that go?
No, I didn't start till 55, and this is in
almost 10 years later.
Yeah, and
But you But you knew of it, and you put it in place on the farm?
On the
with
farm,
Dad's-
yeah,
Dad's approval?
yeah, yes, yeah, it was there was never any discussion about whether it was the right thing or the wrong thing to do. It was the thing to do because of the danger of a bull and the quality of cattle we were getting by using AI. And it was, you wonder how you made it though. When I started breeding cows, it was $5 a cow. That was for my trip and the semen. And if she repeated, you gave two more services and no charge. And how I made enough money to build a house on the corner of the farm, I don't know with those but I bred a lot of cows. They say that I've bred 500,000 cows. That's what the company says. But
And who was the first company you worked with?
it was Maryland Artificial Breeding Co-op, was what it was, located at College Park. And then they moved from College Park to up on 15 above Frederick. That's where they moved to. And then it became Maryland, West Virginia Bull Stud. And then from Maryland, West Virginia Bull Stud became Sire Power. And at Tunkhannock was where it was located in Pennsylvania. And now it is Select Sire Power is what it's called now. We've joined up with one of the largest co-ops in the country.
So
Select.
did the University of Maryland pick up on your knowledge and advance it?
On my knowledge, well, no, the Weatherby is the one that really kicked it in gear in the East. E.J. Weatherby was Dr. E.J. Weatherby. He started in New Jersey, and then he worked with Maryland Co-op to get it going.
So for the first version of the company, you then had an outfit, you had your equipment, you had a vehicle, and then the company gave you a territory? How did that work?
Yeah, we had territories. When I first started, I didn't have Harrod County. I had what they called Damascus Mount Airy. I had the corner of Carroll, I had the corner of Frederick and Montgomery, and from 97, I had from 97 up the western end of Harrod County, west of 97. That was my area. And then Harrod County had so much trouble with technicians, and people in Harrod County in this area were calling me. And I went, and Phil Jones was chairman of the board, and he wrote me a letter and asked me not to come into Harrod County to breed because it wasn't my area. And I said, Phil, you tell those people not to call me and I won't go. I said, I mean, these are people that I've known all my life, and they called me to breed a cow. I'm not going to tell them, no, I'm not going to breed your cow. And so then it wasn't long before they gave me Harrod County and took some of that other area away from me. I had Cedar Grove in Montgomery County, and at that time, Montgomery County and Cedar Grove was full of cows, and now there's no cows in Cedar Grove now.
Does an AI specialist need to work with a vet?
Well, you need to get good. If you have a cow you're having trouble getting pregnant, some people will call the vet and have it. But I'm no vet, don't get me wrong, but I've been going in cows for 60 years. I know when a cow her ovaries aren't proper. I know when she needs, if she has an infection in her uterus. I've done that, or removed yellow bodies on a cow's ovaries. I mean, Dick Huff told me one time they're gonna hang me from a tree because I was doing that kind of work and not a vet. But I was just doing it for the farmers that I was working with to save them from paying a vet to come. And
Yeah, all the vets we interviewed have complained about you, but don't worry about it, David.
right, Yeah.
Spoke very highly of it.
I had to, one of the Driggin Manor, the pals at Driggin Manor, Mr. Powell, that was the nicest group of people to work with. That's one reason I don't make a lot of money breeding cows, but the people I've worked with, I mean, I'm into the fourth generation, like at the Jones farm when Mr. Ridgely was there, and then then Phil came along, and then Tim Jones, and now Tim's kids. I mean, that's the fourth generation I've worked with, and that's why I've stayed with it. My wife thinks that it's time for me to be giving it up, but I just like working with those people. Joneses are the nice. The only problem I have with Jones is they milk so late at night. If I have a meeting to go to, forget it. If Joneses have a cow to breed, because they milk. Now this morning we were done milking at 5:45, and I told my grandson, I said, now, Derek, you can go down and help Phil get started milking this morning. See, they're probably starting about 6:30 or 6:45, and it is. But don't get me wrong, I think the world of those people. But it does when they milk so late, because they don't catch the cow till when she comes in the milking parlor to be milked. When they have a couple of chutes, they'll catch the cow in the chute for me to breed, and that's why it's so late breeding there, because they don't catch the cow till they milk her. But now I breed for Wayne Warfield over at Etchison. If he knows that I got a meeting to go to before he milks, he'll put the cows in the chute. But Ann says, well, why don't you ask Phil? I said, I don't want to upset them. That's the way they do it, and I'll just work with it.
I assume every cow doesn't have a name. They got some kind of numbers.
We have a name for every cow of ours. We go by names rather. Now, most people, it's numbers. Yeah, it's numbers. Yeah.
20 minutes.
So, David, I'd like you to give us a sense of comparison here. Your earlier days of AI work and today's AI work. We know that it's a process, and we know that it creates a beautiful cow thereafter. What was the needs then for the cow, and is it changed for the needs now for the cow?
Well, I guess the first thing that most people were concerned about when you first started with AI is milk production, and that's what. I mean, even though we were showing cows, we still wanted to make sure that it's nice to have a pretty cow, but if she doesn't milk, she's not any good to you. So we want to make sure we were getting production. But now we're getting both. We're getting that pretty cow with good production because of how it has increased through AI using those good bulls. We just had a show at the fairgrounds last Saturday a week, and you couldn't believe the quality that was in that show ring of those animals. And I mean, it's had good breeding, AI breeding, people selecting the right bull. And that, milk prices are terrible right now. You've probably heard in 2014, our July milk check was $92,000. 2015, we shipped 1,500 more pound of milk in July of 14 than we did in 15. No, 15 than we did in 14. And we got $42,000 for that milk. That's how much it has kicked off. But what helped us this past year was our corn yields and our grain yields and our soybean yields were so good that helped us, because we were really as I told what we bought farm-wise, we would have really been in trouble if we hadn't had our good yields this past year. So I know I'm getting off the subject when you start me on something.
It's okay. AI, it's affected a lot on the outcome and the development of the cow. How about the life cycle of the cow? Has it,
Productive life, that is one of the categories that they study on the bulls. And when you see a pedigree of a bull on his production, you'll see the conception of his daughters and the productive life of his daughters. So, and that's something that people look into because of the cost of raising a replacement for her. So you like to keep her around as long as you can. So that is an important feature of breeding nowadays.
have you thought about growing your farm more?
You mean expanding? Yeah, I have a little problem with all the articles. The reason why milk prices are so bad because we have too much milk. And when I see an article about expanding, well, then that irks me because we have a problem now. I mean, there are milk organizations that are telling farmers to cut back, to not to raise as many heifers, but yet there are 20 and 30,000 cow herds in this country, and that's what's causing all the. And I know we're a little producer, but I said a person doesn't need to milk 20,000 cows to make a living. But free enterprise system. Who am I to tell that man not to expand his herd? But I guess that kills our business. They say farmers are their own worst enemies, but overproduction. But I do listen to a lot of religious programs, and there is a James Robinson that goes on about the world food shortage and how the United States is using all the corn to grow ethanol and people don't have enough to eat. That's not true. I called the program, and the lady was really nice. She listened to me, and I said, we're overproducing in this country. And I mean, getting it to Africa, where you see people starving to death, but yet you never see any crops growing. Why can't they grow something to feed themselves? I mean, I know you have your dictators and that probably take the food away from the poor people. So that's another subject.
Let's go back a bit to the what is it? 4 children you have?
How many?
How many you got?
7.
7.
7.
3 and
I have
4 and 3.
4.
So who took interest in being on your farm hand at first? How did you handle the disbursement of, I got a farm here and I've got 7 kids.
Okay, there were 4 girls and 3 boys. Mike, the oldest boy, all 3 boys were interested in agriculture, and all of them worked on the farm. And I wanted all of them to, when they graduated, to go work away from home for a while. And if they wanted to come back for the farm, I said, there's a place for you. Well, Mike never did leave. He stayed on the farm. Then he left for 4 years. He committed to a herd up in Pennsylvania as herdsman for 4 years. After 2 years, when all the kids went to Ocean City, then he told them he wanted to come back. And Johnny, the youngest boy, he went away for 6 months and worked for a fellow up in Pennsylvania. Said it was the worst 6 months of his life. So he was back. But Johnny said, the youngest boy, he said 2 boys on the farm was enough. He thought that 2, so he went to fitting cattle. and started out with a trailer and hauled cattle to different shows and sales. And now he has a Peterbilt with a 55-foot trailer, and he can be gone for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, just hauling cattle back and forth different. Yeah, I asked Ann the other day, I said, how long has it been since Johnny's been home? And she said, well, he left 3 weeks ago. He calls almost every day though, but he was up in New York. He goes as far as Iowa and out in the Dakotas, but he has a fellow that he works with that will, if he has West Coast cattle to haul, that fellow will pick up cattle and take them to the West Coast, and then if he has something that's coming east, he'll bring it to Johnny. So that's why he is on the road so much. He's busy. He's got a, and I don't mean I sound like bragging again, but he has a good reputation of people saying the cattle look better when they come off his trailer than they do when he goes on. If he's going to the Midwest, and he's got places where he can stop overnight, and people that he worked with, and unload them and put them in a barn overnight, and then pick them, load them in the morning, and then take them on west.
Less stress on them.
Yeah. But we, when people tease us about having 7 kids, you know what my wife tells them? That she was a good Catholic and I was a passionate Protestant. That's why we have 7 kids.
Any of their kids gotten the interest in farming?
Yeah, well, all of our kids have shown in 4-H Club, and we have 2 daughters that live. One daughter and son-in-law bought my brother-in-law's farm. Do you ever remember Richie Hardy or any of the Hardy family? Richie ran for county council one time against Mr. Huff, Richie Hardy. But anyway, Reed Hardy was my brother-in-law, and my brother-in-law, anyway, my brother-in-law asked me if we were interested, this is before the Zepp place, if we were interested in buying the farm. And I said, if I can afford it, and it's a 300-acre farm. He said, I'd like to have $600,000 for it. Well, at that, and even though that was probably 25 years ago, it was a good farm and it was worth that. But then he had a brother that, when he came back to me, the brother wanted $1 million something for it. So I said, Reed, you farm. You know, that's why he wasn't farming, because he weren't making any money. And I said, we can't afford that. But then my brother-in-law, Rhonda's husband, they did buy it because he ran a welding business for his uncle, Winkler Welding. I don't know if you ever heard of it or not, but he's a commercial welding company that they've been very successful, and they both end up buying the farm. So they have cattle. We farmed it for many a year, but then we have about 30 heifers over there on the farm, and they have some beef, and the kids show at the fair. And then Carol, the other daughter that is, her husband's in financial management, they bought a farm, 20 acres right out of Lisbon on 94. And they keep a couple heifers there, and because they have a daughter that shows in 4-H Club. And see, Mike, the oldest boy, all his 3 girls showed at the fairs, but the oldest girl's a school teacher, and the next girl is a boat captain for a billionaire. I have a granddaughter that's a boat captain. I mean, they never went really. They showed at the fairs, and Becky was Howard County Farm Queen, Mike's oldest girl. But they didn't. They did something else. And see, Johnny never got married. Johnny's 50 couple years old. He said, "What I do isn't for a married man," and it's true. He's, as I said, he was gone for 3 weeks. And he said he's just didn't, but he calls every day. he fusses because he still lives at home, 50. I said, you don't live at home, you live in that trail, that Peterbilt. That's,
Back then.
yeah.
What will happen to your farm?
I have a grandson, Derek, that Denny's the one of the boys' son, that's into it. He's really in. He's 25 years old, and he really. I mean, he gets up at 3:30, quarter after 3 in the morning, every morning. And he was when I came home from calls last night. We were cleaning the manure pit. He was still hauling manure, and it was almost dark. But he was dragging a little bit this morning while we were milking. But he has a friend that's a veterinarian, and she's when she's not working at her vet practice, she worked for how Derek met her. There's a Transova called company up in Hagerstown that does embryo work. That's something I haven't mentioned. We can flush a cow, take her eggs. The last one we flushed, we got 20 eggs out of her. We do that to our best cows, and then put them into our ordinary cows. Those eggs in our ordinary cows that we want. Well, this lady worked for this company up at Hagerstown, Transova, and then when she met Derek, she traveled all over the East flushing cows. And after she met Derek, she didn't want to do that. She wanted to be around, so she went to work for her local vet that she worked to when she was going to school. She works for small animals now. But when she's not working at that vet's office, she's there in that melting pile or working on that farm. And I said to her one time, they say they're going to get married. They haven't gotten married yet. But I said to her one time, I said, does Mapledale, when you work at Mapledale, does that pay as well as that practice at Moncton? She said, no, but Mapledale has some fringe benefits, she said. But Derek is right into it.
How's the car doing? How's the memory?
At least 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
But she is really, because I said my wife milks too, and Ann said, I hate to milk with Jen, because she's so fast it makes me look bad, she said.
So David, I don't foresee this happening in the near future, but suppose that one day you're looking down from heaven and you're looking at this farm. What does that farm operation look like?
Well, I think Derek is a good manager. He gets along with people. I mean, he's going to have some help. I mean, I don't know. They're not married. They may probably have children, but I mean, he's going to need. We don't have any full-time help right now, but we have. Denny was on the judging team with a girl at Linganore High School. She's a VOAG teacher at Linganore, and she has students that only need morning classes, and almost every year we get a student that in the evening will come in and at 1:30 from school and help us do the evening work. And it seems like every year we almost have a boy that does that. And then we have a boy that came to work for us when he was 13 years old, an excellent operator. He worked for the county, but it seemed like when we fill silo or have work that, where we need extra help, he's got enough time built up that he helps. So I know Derek's going to need help with the operation that we have now. And I don't think he wants to expand anymore. So I feel confident that Mapledale Farm will be in operation for many years. I'll be surprised if it isn't. My daughter Rhonda, she loves the Ayrshire cows too. And she told me one time, Dad, I want you to put in your will, long as there's a Mapledale Farm, there will be Ayrshires on it, she said. See, we have Ayrshires and Holsteins, the black and white we have both breeds.
Is the farm protected Or is it, what's the hard?
Preservation.
Is it,
Farm in preservation?
yeah, all three farms are in preservation.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask you if you've ever been to the Howard County Fair, but we already know that you were probably one of the earliest ones, at least.
I have never missed a Howard County Fair, right from get-go.
We gotta get him an award for that, don't we?
Well, see,
You remember when it was at Brendel Manor Park?
oh yeah, showed there. Showed at Ellicott City High School, showed at Laurel Raceway.
Yeah, I live almost right next to Brendel Manor, Edmund Figgy's. Remember, opposite the Manor Lane, but I was just down the road a little bit from Brendel Manor Park.
Okay,
You
I,
have questions for him? No. So, David, let's think back to the last time you went to the fair, which we obviously know is across the street now.
yeah.
But have you you've been there then?
Oh yeah,
A lot?
yeah,
Sounds like,
Yeah.
looks like.
yeah.
So you're walking around the fairgrounds and a young guy spots you. Now you know you've been at this for 60 years or more. And so it's gonna be easy to tell if anybody ever went to a presentation or a lecture or a meeting that that's David, all right, that's David Patrick right there. He comes up to you though, he knows you, but you don't know him, and he says, I wanna get into farming, Mr. Patrick. Do you have any advice to give me?
In Howard County.
I tell people that unless you have family help to get you going, it's really difficult in this area to get into farming. I don't like to, but there are government programs that beginning farmers that can help you, but there aren't many farms left that can go into preservation. I think there are about 30,000. When I was on the preservation board, I think we were at 23,000 acres in Howard County was in preservation. But now we're over 30 that are in the preservation, some sort of preservation farm. And as I said, my brother-in-law's farm is in preservation. The Tally Farm that's on the corner of Daisy Road and 144, that is in preservation. That's a farm we rent. So a lot of the ground that we farm, Remitty Farm is preservation that we rent. So it would be difficult in Howard County to get into farming. I don't like to be negative on anybody but unless you have family I don't know that I could have gotten into farming because our family's never had a lot of money. I don't know if it hadn't been for good neighbors and people that treat us right, I don't know we could be in the position we're in now. The Murray farm I said we bought about 5 years ago, I bred cows for Calvin Murray, and he gave up the farm, and he quit farming and rented it to the boy that was working for him. And his name was David Mollix. It's not the David Mollix there at Glendale, another David Mollix. And he said to me that if David ever has to give it up, I'm going to give you a call. Well, sadly, David developed cancer and had to give it up. And he called me. And I went up, and I don't know whether you know prices of rented ground. Some of them are way up there. Calvin said, this was probably 14 years ago, though 15 years ago. He said $45 an acre. Is that okay? I said, yeah, that's fine. That's so. and then I soil tested it. Need 4 ton of lime. And he said, you put the lime on, I'll pay for the lime. I said, no, I think we should pay for half of it. He said, no, you lime it, bring it up to snuff, and I'll pay for it. So I did, brought it up to snuff. And then we were supposed to be paying $45 an acre for it. And after a while, I'd give him my rent check, and he'd write me a check for the same amount for lime and fertilizer. So there for 6 or 7 years, we rented a 300-acre farm, a little more than 300 acres, and paid no rent. So that's really what, I mean, if you had gone up to our farm 50, 60 years ago, and this sounds like bragging again, but then see what it is now, the home farm, with all the buildings and all, you know that somebody had to be lucky or give you some breaks. And we have had people give us breaks, and that helped to put us where we are. Because, as I've said many times in this little interview, our family is never, my father never bothered. Money wasn't important to him. He loved his church and family, and that was his life. And he never seemed to bother about it because of, he didn't have money to go travel around, and that never bothered him.
This has been wonderful. I've learned so much. Let me ask you a quick question. Is there something else you want to add to this interview?
I don't know. There are a lot of things that have happened over the years, and I guess I've been blessed with a good family, and I'm not saying that everybody in the Patrick family is an angel and walks around with wings, because we have a granddaughter that had a drug problem that it really has upset the family. She just got in with the wrong crowd, and that upsets her parents, and she's got 2 sisters that are angels. One, as I said, was a school teacher, and 2 little kids, and sweet as can be, and then her other sister is the boat captain for a billionaire, and again, this is a story that I'll tell, and it sounds like bragging. Becky, the oldest granddaughter, came to me, and she said, Pop, I want you to do my wedding. And I said, Becky, I'm not ordained. I can't do your wedding, and to make it legal. And she says, well, Mom knows how to. There's a universal church. If you take this course, then you can be ordained. So I did, and I did her wedding. Then when the next girl, her boat captain's sister, wanted to get married, she wanted me to do it. And then we had a girl working for us on the farm that was getting married, and she was getting married ahead of Becky. And she said, won't you do my wedding? And then that'll give you some practice for, that would be the first one I did. That'll be practice for Becky's wedding. So I did, and I even talked to Donnie Bandel's daughter was our preacher then, Lisa Bandel. And I went to Lisa and told her what my granddaughter wanted me to do, and she didn't think I should do it. She said but then I talked to people in the church, and everybody to a member said if my granddaughter wanted me to do her wedding, and it was legally could be done correctly, that they would do it. So I went ahead and did it because even though Lisa was I thought the world of her. She was our minister, and I really hated to lose her. She went down to Davidsonville.
I want to ask you, Dave, what are your hobbies today, if any? You have any hobbies?
Well, when I was younger and had a little more energy, I was a Baltimore Colt fan. I went to the Colts. In fact, I had tickets for the Colts for about 6 or 7 years, and I talked about people that have done things for me that I never paid a cent for. Our principal at Lisbon School had tickets up in the 3 rows from the top, and he developed a heart condition and couldn't go up the stairs. And he gave me, they wouldn't take anything for him, gave me those tickets. I said 6 or 7 years. I'm sure it was that long. And that was something that, but then it got to the point where I didn't have as much spunk. I didn't go. And I went to in fact, we took cows into the Memorial Stadium for milking contests for the Oriole games. When in dairy night, they had a dairy night. And they were things that I love sports. We had a team at Lisbon that played all over the county. Turner Nichols, you ever know Turner Nichols? Turner Nichols played for Clarksville. He weighed about 100 pounds more than I did. I played center for Lisbon, and Turner played center for Clarksville, and he used to push me all over the court. I played Jimmy Rogers. Do you ever know Jimmy Rogers owned Forrest Diner? Okay, him and Carl Childress were brother-in-laws that ran Forrest Diner. And Jimmy Rogers used to sneak down there in the corner, and he could hit those sides for Ellicott City, hit those shots. He was good. In fact, Jimmy Rogers' grandson comes in the evening after school and helps us at the farm. Am I running out of your all's time?
It's sort of.
Okay, I'll shut up.
I want to thank you so much, though.